I was 14 when it happened, during my Bronze Duke of Edinburgh expedition. If you're not from the UK, DAFI is this program where you volunteer, learn a skill, do some physical activity, and at the end, there's this expedition part. That's the part everyone talks about. You're given a map and a route, and over 2 or 3 days, you have to walk it with your group, carrying your own gear, navigating yourselves, camping overnight, the whole thing. It's meant to teach you teamwork and independence. But no one ever warns you about what can happen out there. Not the weather, not getting lost, I mean real danger. The kind that sticks with you. Our group was 4 of us. Me, Josh, Hannah, and Ellie. We weren't particularly close friends, just schoolmates lumped together. It was early summer, but the clouds were heavy and low, threatening rain all morning. The route for that day took us through a quiet, rural bit of countryside somewhere near the border of a nature reserve and some old farmland. We'd followed a trail through a few open fields, skirted the edge of a sheep paddock, and then found ourselves moving into denser terrain. Lots of thorny bushes, overgrown hedgerows, and a narrow dirt track that looked like it hadn't been walked in a while. You couldn't see much ahead or behind once you were inside. Everything was boxed in by green. No sounds of the road, barely any birdsong. Just our boots against the earth and the rustling of leaves. The map said we had to go through that section to cut across to the next checkpoint. It wasn't marked as private land or anything, just a lesser-used path. About 10 minutes into this green tunnel of bushes and undergrowth, we came around a bend and saw it. A car, parked up in a small, flattened clearing to the side of the track. It was one of those dull gray Vauxhalls, nothing flashy. The car had all 4 doors shut, but the boot was open and there were 2 men standing by it. The first guy was in a full dark suit, proper smart, black shoes, short cropped hair. The second man was the opposite. Slouched posture, gray tracksuit, trainers, hood down. And a third guy, the one I remember the most, was behind the car, off the path just slightly, half shielded by tall grass. He was big, tall and wide with thick arms, wearing a tight white vest and blue work trousers. His head was shaved bald and he had a shovel in his hands. He was digging. We didn't say anything. We were maybe 20 feet away when we first saw them, and all of us slowed down almost immediately. I don't think any of us even needed to exchange looks. Something about the whole setup was wrong. There was no reason for anyone to be there, and definitely not dressed like that. The man in the suit didn't look like someone who went for woodland strolls, and the guy with the shovel wasn't planting trees. When they noticed us, everything changed. The suit guy was talking to the one in the tracksuit. They both had something laid out in the boot. Couldn't see what, just a glimpse of something metallic. Could have been tools, could have been something worse. The digging guy, he froze first. He looked up from the hole, saw us, and just stood there holding the shovel in both hands, breathing heavily. Then suit guy slammed the boot shut hard and turned to stare straight at us. All 3 of them were still. No one said anything yet. It was like they were trying to figure out who we were and whether we were a problem. Then the big guy stepped forward, just a few steps toward the path. His voice was loud, thick, low. He pointed the shovel vaguely in our direction and told us to get the fuck out now or I'll make you. We didn't ask questions. No one said a word. We just moved, fast. Josh was in front, then me, then the girls. We didn't even wait to see if they were following. I kept expecting to hear running footsteps behind us, or a car door slam and the engine revving. But nothing came. Still, we kept going. Even when the thorn bushes scratched our arms and faces, even when the path forked and we weren't totally sure which direction to take. We didn't stop until we were back out into open space. A stretch of farmland with a long fence line and a distant farmhouse. We checked the map again then, hands shaking. I could barely focus. My brain was still stuck back in that clearing. I kept replaying it in my head. The hole. The way the suit guy moved so quickly to shut the boot. The way all 3 of them looked at us. It wasn't just annoyance or surprise. It was like anger that we'd seen something, like we'd interrupted something important. I didn't want to say it, but I think we all thought the same thing. That hole wasn't for a tree. We made it to our campsite that evening without any more weird encounters, but we were all quiet. Normally, kids our age would joke about something like that, laugh it off, turn it into a campfire story, make it silly. But we didn't. No one brought it up until we were back home after the whole expedition ended. I told my parents the bare minimum, just that we saw some guys in the woods acting weird and it freaked us out. They thought maybe it was people dumping stuff illegally, like rubbish or stolen things. I let them believe that, but deep down, I knew it was more. The size of that hole wasn't for trash. And the way they reacted, the threat, it felt like we had just barely walked away from something way more serious than we were meant to witness. A few weeks later, I tried to find something online. I searched the name of the area, nearby towns, even checked police reports and news articles. Nothing. Not a mention of anything unusual. No arrests, no missing people from that specific week. Either nothing happened or whatever was going on was buried, literally or otherwise. I never did Daffy Silver. I told people I didn't have the time, but really, I just didn't want to risk running into something like that again. Once is enough. I've walked through a lot of woods since then, for hikes, for walks with friends, even just to clear my head. But I never fully relax when I'm out in the middle of nowhere anymore, especially when it gets quiet. You start realizing how easy it is for things to happen out there without anyone ever knowing. No cameras, no bystanders, no one to hear you if you scream. Just trees and dirt and silence. And once in a while, even now, I still see their faces in my mind. The coldness, the calmness, the way they didn't panic when we showed up. Like they'd done it before. Like they knew we'd leave because they knew how to make people disappear if they didn't. We were lucky. That's all I can really say. We saw something we shouldn't have and we walked away. But every now and then, I wonder how close we really were to not walking away at all. It was a story I only heard once, maybe 12 years ago now, and I never forgot it. A buddy of mine, let's call him Jake, told it to me when we were hanging out late one night, sitting around a campfire, just the two of us. We'd been talking about weird things we'd seen outdoors, and after a long silence, he started telling me the story in a low voice. I could tell he didn't really want to talk about it. His tone changed. It was like he had to convince himself it had even happened, but he wasn't exaggerating or trying to be dramatic. I'd known Jake a long time. He wasn't the type to make stuff up, and whatever he saw that day had stuck with him. Even as he told it, he kept glancing into the trees like he was expecting something to walk out of the dark. He only ever told me once and never brought it up again. He said it happened maybe 2 or 3 years before he told me, so this would have been over 15 years ago now. He and a couple of friends had gone out riding four-wheelers one weekend at the St. Anthony Sand Dunes in Idaho. It's this huge expanse of white sand, rolling hills, desert terrain, and these odd patches of wilderness scattered around. It's mostly open, but there are occasional trees or scrubby brush here and there. It's the kind of place where you can ride for hours and barely see another soul if you head out far enough. They'd been riding since early in the morning, just enjoying the sun and the freedom. The dunes stretched out for miles, and the air was dry and still. You could see all the way to the distant hills on a clear day. They had a cooler strapped down on one of the quads, packed with water and snacks, and they weren't in any rush, just cruising, climbing hills, coasting down them, sometimes racing each other through the open stretches. There were 3 of them, Jake, his cousin Brian, and another guy named Matt. They'd done trips like that before, and nothing weird had ever happened. Until this one. At some point in the late afternoon, they were taking a breather on top of one of the larger dunes. That's when Jake saw it first. Off in the distance, maybe half a mile away, was a single tree standing on top of a low hill. That wasn't too strange in itself, though it was odd to see one tree growing alone out there in the middle of nothing but sand. But it wasn't the tree that caught his attention, it was the figure standing next to it. He said at first he thought it was someone in some sort of costume, or maybe wearing hunting gear or something, he couldn't tell. The figure was all black, and from where they were, it looked kind of bulky. Almost like the guy was wearing a gorilla suit or heavy winter gear. The sun was behind them, so he couldn't make out any real features. Just the shape of a man, tall, thick, and not moving. He was standing right next to the tree, one hand gripping a branch, just watching them. Not waving, not walking, just staring from a distance. They sat there for a moment, trying to figure out what they were looking at. Jake pointed it out to Brian and Matt, and they all saw it. None of them said much about it, just shrugged it off. Probably some hiker or dune enthusiast out there messing around. They figured maybe the guy had a tent nearby or was waiting for someone. There was no reason to be alarmed, at least not yet. So they kept riding, eventually looping around toward that part of the dunes. It took them a while to get over there, maybe 30 minutes or more. They weren't in a rush, just following the general direction. When they finally crested the hill where they'd seen the tree, the figure was gone. The tree was still there, big, tall, with wide-reaching limbs and thick branches, but no sign of the man in black. That's when things started to feel weird. Jake told me that from a distance, the tree hadn't looked especially large. It looked like one of those short, scrubby desert trees that barely break 8 feet. But up close, it was much taller. Massive, really. Easily 30 feet, maybe more, and the lowest branch was a good 10 feet off the ground. Thick, healthy wood, not dead or dried out, which was odd, considering it was standing in the middle of dry sand with no other plants around it for hundreds of feet. There was no shade, no underbrush, just the one tree sitting like a landmark on its own little rise. But what really messed with them was the branch the figure had been holding. Jake said he remembered clear as day. The figure's hand had been resting on one of the low-hanging branches. That's what made him think the guy was just tall, not huge. But now, standing right under it, they realized the branch wasn't low at all. It was over 10 feet high. No normal person could have reached it just by standing there. And the figure they'd seen had been resting its hand on it like it was nothing, which meant either the guy was standing on something or he was ridiculously tall. Not just a tall man, but unnaturally tall. Maybe 7.5, 8 feet, maybe more. And thick, not lanky like a basketball player. This thing had mass to it. Jake said the proportions weren't right. Broad shoulders, thick arms, like something that wasn't built like a normal man. They checked around for tracks, but the sand was too dry and windblown. They couldn't find anything. No footprints, no tire marks, no signs of a tent or tools or anything that might show someone had been camping nearby. It was like whoever or whatever they saw had just vanished. They stayed around for maybe 10, 15 minutes, walking circles around the tree, trying to shake the weird feeling crawling up their spines. Jake said he kept looking over his shoulder, expecting to see the black figure watching them again from another hilltop. But there was nothing, just quiet dunes and soft wind. Eventually, they left. No one said much on the ride back. They packed up and drove home that evening instead of staying another night like they'd originally planned. Jake never told his parents or anyone else. He only told me that one night, and afterward, he brushed it off like it was nothing. But I remember the look on his face when he told it. I remember how he went quiet for a long time after, just staring at the fire. I think what bothered him the most wasn't that he didn't know what it was. It was that it had been watching them. Standing out there alone, silent, massive, just watching. Not approaching, not running. Like it wasn't scared of them. Like it had been there before and would still be there after they left. He said he'd never gone back to that part of the dunes again. Not even once. And he didn't ride much after that either. Sold his quad a couple years later. Claimed he was getting too old for it, but I always figured it was something else. Something about that day never left him. I've told this story a couple times over the years, but always the same way he told it. No monsters, no aliens, no ghost stories. Just a strange figure standing by a tree where no one should have been able to stand like that. No answers, just questions that don't go away. I've looked into reports of Bigfoot sightings in Idaho since then. People say they've seen things in those dunes before, huge figures at a distance, weird footprints, strange howls at night. But I don't know. I don't think Jake saw Bigfoot. I think he saw something else. Something we don't have a name for. Something that was real and tall and absolutely not supposed to be there. Whatever it was, it saw them first. And for a moment, it let them see it too. I've lived in these woods for a little over 7 years now. It's just me and my dog, a German Shepherd named Duke. I built the tiny house myself. Nothing fancy, just a couple rooms with stove, solar panels, propane for cooking. My property runs right up to a creek, then past that it's just open land. Rolling hills, some rocky ridges, and nothing else for over 100 acres. No neighbors. Closest town's about 20 minutes away if you drive fast. Nights are quiet out here. Real quiet. The kind of quiet where your ears ring until the wind rustles something in the trees and breaks the silence. The kind of quiet where every sound stands out. You get used to it. You learn the sounds. Crickets, owls, coyotes, deer moving through the brush. Sometimes it sounds like people talking far away, but it's usually just the coyotes. They have that high-pitched yipping that can almost sound like laughing or crying if you're not used to it. I've never really been afraid out here. I grew up in the woods. My dad used to take me hunting and fishing, taught me how to live out here without being stupid or careless. I've seen bears, a couple bobcats, even a cougar once, but nothing ever gave me that feeling, that gut feeling that something's wrong. Until that one night. Started pretty normal. I'd worked most of the day splitting wood and checking the fence line near the creek. Some branches had fallen across it during a storm a few days back, so I spent time clearing that too. It was late fall, maybe early November. The leaves were mostly off the trees, and the nights had started dropping below freezing. I made dinner like I always do, just something simple, canned chili and toast. Fed Duke. He ate like normal. We sat on the porch for a while after that. The stars were out, no clouds, and the air had that cold, sharp bite to it. Duke just lay next to me, ears twitching now and then. I think it was around 10:30 when I heard it. At first I thought it was coyotes. It was this high, sharp sound, kind of like a scream but broken up. It didn't echo like a normal scream would in the woods. It was rough and weak, like it was coming from something already halfway dead. It went quiet for a few minutes, then started up again, then stopped. I figured, okay, maybe coyotes got a deer or a rabbit and it's just the death throes echoing across the hills. Happens sometimes. But Duke was acting weird. He stood up stiff, tail low, ears back. Not barking, not growling, just alert, eyes locked on the tree line near the creek. I watched him for a minute, then whistled low and said his name, but he didn't budge. Just kept staring. I got my spotlight from inside and turned it on. Shined it out across the creek and into the woods. Nothing. No eye shine. No movement. Just trees and brush. Normally Duke is the first one to take off if there's a raccoon or a possum nearby. He's not aggressive, but he's always curious. This night, though, he stayed right next to me. When I got up to go down the steps, he blocked me. Not in a loud or dramatic way, just moved in front of me, like he was trying to tell me not to go. I'm not a superstitious guy, but when your dog that knows these woods better than most people gets nervous, you listen. I waited a few more minutes. The noise didn't come back. Eventually, I locked the front door and went to bed. Duke didn't follow me to the bedroom like usual. He lay down by the front door, facing it, and stayed that way the whole night. Every time I woke up and looked, there he was, awake, still, staring at the door. By morning, whatever tension had been in the air was gone. The sun was out, weak and low in the sky, frost on the porch boards. I made coffee and fed Duke. He still seemed a little on edge, but not like the night before. I figured I'd go take a look around, see if I could find tracks or maybe a spot where something had been killed. I threw on my jacket, boots, grabbed the .22 rifle I usually take when walking the back part of the property, and whistled for Duke. He came immediately and stuck close to my side, which was unusual. Normally he runs ahead, circles back, checks things out. We crossed the creek using the old fallen log I keep trimmed for a footbridge. Duke didn't hesitate, but once we got across, he started pulling ahead. Not running, but moving fast and steady, like he had a place in mind. We walked for maybe 10 minutes, past the thickets and through the narrow game trails, until we reached the rocky ridge on the far end of the property. It's a steep drop, maybe 20 feet, but jagged rock below. Not something you'd want to fall onto. Duke stopped at the edge and sat down. Didn't bark, didn't growl, just looked down. I walked up next to him and looked over. That's when I saw him. A man, late 20s maybe, hard to tell. Jeans, hoodie, hiking boots, lying in a twisted position near the base of the rocks. There was blood, a lot of it, dried into the leaves around him. His leg was clearly broken, bent wrong at the thigh, and one arm was twisted so bad I could see bone. He wasn't moving. His face was half covered in leaves, but I could tell it was someone I didn't recognize. For a second, I thought he might be dead. Then I saw his chest move barely, just enough to know he was still alive. I climbed down the safest part of the ridge and made my way over, careful not to slip. The smell hit me before I even got close. Blood, sweat, something else like rot. I knelt down and saw his eyes flutter a bit. He wasn't awake really, just alive in the way a candle is still burning right before it gutters out. There wasn't much I could do down there. I had no cell signal that far back, so I ran back to the house with Duke and called 911. Told them what I saw, gave them coordinates from the GPS, and they sent out deputies and an ambulance with a rescue team. Took them a while to reach the spot. I waited with them to guide them down the trail. A couple of the paramedics said he was lucky I found him when I did. Said if he'd spent another day out there, he'd have bled out or frozen to death. Later on, one of the deputies told me he'd been reported missing 2 days earlier. His car had been found at the trailhead about 3 miles away, up by the highway. They think he came out here alone, maybe looking for a place to die. They found a note in his car. I didn't ask what it said. Didn't want to know. What stuck with me most was the sound. That noise I heard in the night. I realized he must have jumped right around then. Thought the drop was far enough. It wasn't. Instead of dying, he shattered his body on the rocks and lay there in the dark, alone, screaming into the woods, hoping someone would hear. And nobody did, except me and Duke. After they took him away, I walked back out there a few days later, just to look. The blood was still there, dried into the leaves and dirt. Nothing else. I stood there for a long time, thinking about how quiet it had been that night, how close he was, how long he'd laid there, broken, waiting for something, anything. I haven't heard that sound again since. Duke still lays by the door some nights. Maybe he remembers, maybe he doesn't. But now, every time I hear the coyotes, I listen a little harder, just in case. A few years ago, I went on a camping trip that I still think about more than I'd like to admit. It happened in a town called Gentryville, Indiana. Small place, around 260 people. The kind of town where you pass through in a minute if you blink at the wrong time. I wasn't familiar with it at all, but my friend who grew up around there invited me out for a weekend of camping, and I don't turn those down. I've always loved being outdoors. I enjoy getting away from the noise, shutting off my phone, breathing in air that doesn't smell like exhaust or someone else's microwave dinner. So, when he told me to come out, I packed up and hit the road. It was a long drive. I remember passing mostly farms, woods, a few broken down houses with old cars in the yard. Nothing special. Once I got into town, I followed the directions he gave me to the campsite. We weren't deep in the wilderness or anything. The spot was just off the main road, behind a small, plain white church. The church looked like every other old church I've seen in small towns. Wooden, square, with a simple steeple, no windows lit. It didn't seem like it had been used in years. There were a few gravestones behind it, crooked and worn, but nothing that caught my attention. The woods behind the church weren't that thick either. You could still see some light from the road through the trees if you looked hard enough. We set up camp maybe 50 yards into the woods, just far enough in that we wouldn't be seen from the road. There were 4 of us, me, my friend, and 2 other guys he grew up with. We built a fire, cracked some beers, and sat around talking like people do when they're trying to get away from real life for a bit. It was a calm evening, the kind where everything feels easy. The fire crackled just loud enough to drown out the usual sounds of the woods. The sky was clear, and the moon was almost full. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. One of those early fall nights where you keep your hoodie on but don't need to zip it up. Later into the night, maybe around midnight, I felt the need to take a leak. I let the others know and stepped away from the fire, walking up the dirt road that led back toward the church. I wasn't trying to go far, just enough to get some privacy. I found a spot maybe 20 feet up the path, not quite in the open but not buried in the trees either. From where I stood, I could still see the faint glow of the fire behind me through the trees. It made me feel grounded, like I wasn't alone. The moonlight made everything around me visible in this pale blue hue. I could make out the outlines of trees, the dips in the dirt road, even some distant branches swaying slightly in the breeze. As I stood there, finishing up, I caught something out of the corner of my eye, a shape that didn't quite belong. At first I thought it was just a tree or maybe a shadow playing tricks on me, but then I looked directly at it. It was standing no more than 12 feet away from me. I don't know how to describe it without sounding insane, but I'll try. The best I can say is it looked like a person, tall, maybe 6'3" or 4", but its body wasn't right. It was dressed in something that looked like metal, but not the way armor or machines do. It was thin, light-looking, almost see-through, like reflective foil that had been pressed flat and shaped to fit a body perfectly. No wrinkles, no folds, nothing loose. It clung to it like a second skin. It didn't make a sound. What got me the most was the face. It wasn't a mask. I know it wasn't. The skin was a dull gray, the color of wet ash, and there were deep lines around the eyes and mouth, like someone who had aged badly but never lost that tightness in their cheeks. The mouth was strange. It pointed downward into a small opening like a slit, with no lips. Its eyes were sunken into its skull, large and black. They didn't glow, didn't blink, just stared. It didn't move, not its body anyway, but the expression changed. It twisted its face slightly, like it was disappointed or angry. That look cut right through me. I felt frozen, not like I was being held by anything, but like my body just stopped responding. I stared at it. It stared at me. That went on for maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like hours. Then, just as quickly as the fear came, it left. I don't know why, but I suddenly felt calm, like something washed over me, making everything feel okay again. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just turned around and walked back down the path, slowly. My steps felt heavy, but I didn't look back. The woods were quiet. No bugs, no wind, no distant animal sounds. Just the faint crackle of the fire growing louder as I got closer. The whole walk back felt peaceful in the strangest way. I don't know how to explain that part. When I got back to the fire, I sat down on the log I'd been using earlier. My heart was calm, almost too calm. Then, all at once, the fear came back and hit me like a wave. My hands started shaking, and my chest tightened up. I looked around at the others laughing about something stupid, and I felt completely disconnected, like I'd stepped out of something I wasn't supposed to see and came back to a world that didn't know. I didn't tell them what I saw. Not really. I just said I thought someone was in the woods, maybe watching us from the trees. I kept it vague because honestly, I didn't want to be the crazy guy that night. But then my friend, without laughing, without skipping a beat, just asked me, "Was it gray?" That question hit me like a punch to the gut. I said yes, quietly, asked him why he would even say that. He just nodded and said that once, years ago, he was working on his car in the driveway late at night. His house backed right up into these woods. He said he heard something, looked up, and saw something similar. Said it rushed at him from the edge of the trees, made no sound, and stopped just short before disappearing back into the woods. He never talked about it much after that, and now I understood why. Neither of us said anything else about it the rest of the night. I didn't sleep well. I kept replaying that stare in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face. Expressionless at first, then slowly twisting into that disapproving glare. I didn't hear anything else that night, and nothing strange happened after that. The next morning, everything looked normal. The trees, the dirt path, even the spot where I'd stood. Nothing out of place. It was like it had never happened. But it did. Since then, I've never looked at camping the same way. I still go, but I don't enjoy it like I used to. I don't wander off alone anymore. And I don't camp near small towns. Especially not near churches that haven't seen a sermon in decades. I don't know what I saw. I don't have answers. I don't want to believe in anything more than people, because people are already complicated and dangerous enough. But I saw something that night that wasn't like anything I've ever known. And even if I tried to write it off, that one question from my friend, "Was it gray?" is something I can never forget. I haven't gone back to Gentryville since. We were on a road trip to Florida. My parents thought it would be fun to drive the whole way down from Indiana. Flights were too expensive, and my mom said it would be a bonding experience for the whole family. We packed up our minivan, loaded the back with coolers, snacks, and bags, and hit the highway just before dawn. It was me, my parents, my 2 younger brothers, my aunt and uncle, their 2 kids, and my grandparents. 3 cars in total. It was one of those summer trips that felt exciting at first, but after a few hours, your legs start to cramp, your back sticks to the seat, and you just want it to be over. We'd been on the road for almost 9 hours when we crossed into Alabama. Everyone was tired and hungry, so we agreed to stop for lunch. We were somewhere near the state border, some small town that didn't even show up on the GPS properly, just a dot on the screen with no name. My dad spotted a small diner off the side of the road, just a little building with faded white paint and a gravel parking lot surrounded by thick woods. The sign above it had letters missing, and the windows were covered in sun-bleached paper signs advertising sweet tea and fried bologna sandwiches. It looked old, but not unsafe. Just a typical southern backroad place. Dad and I got out first to go check if there was room for our group. Everyone else stayed in the cars, stretching their legs or using the rest stop next to the parking lot. I remember stepping out into the heat. It was heavy and sticky, and everything smelled like pine sap and hot pavement. When we opened the diner door, a little brass bell jingled above our heads. There were maybe 10 people inside, all locals, judging by the way they were dressed. Men in faded denim, women in floral shirts or aprons. Nobody said anything when we walked in, not even the waitress behind the counter. The whole place just went quiet, like someone had hit pause. Forks stopped mid-air, conversations died off mid-sentence, and everyone turned their heads at once to look at us. It wasn't just a glance. It was full-on staring. Long, unblinking, silent stares. At first, I thought maybe we'd walked into a private event or something, but no one was smiling. No one looked surprised, just blank. Their expressions were cold and fixed, like they were analyzing us, like they knew right away we weren't from around there. My dad stood still for a second, then took a step toward the counter. He opened his mouth to speak but stopped when a man near the back, balding in a sleeveless shirt, shifted in his seat and placed both his hands on the table in front of him. It wasn't threatening, but it felt intentional, like a subtle signal. I looked around the room. Almost every guy there had his hands either balled into fists or resting flat on the table. The women weren't looking at us anymore. They were staring straight ahead, not saying a word. There was something about the air in that room. It was thick, heavy with some kind of tension I couldn't name, like something was about to happen. My heartbeat picked up. I wasn't scared, not exactly, just uneasy, like being in a place you shouldn't be, like trespassing. Dad didn't say anything else. He turned, nodded to me, and we both walked out. The moment the door closed behind us, I could hear the sound inside return. Forks clinking, voices rising, like nothing had happened. We didn't speak as we got back to the car. He opened his door and told everyone through the window that we were going to drive a little further and find something else. My mom asked why, and he just said the place was full. Nobody questioned it. We pulled out of the parking lot and got back on the highway. About 5 minutes down the road, I asked my dad what really happened. He glanced at me, then looked back at the road and said, "They didn't like us being there." That was clear. We drove another 30 minutes before we found a McDonald's near a gas station. It was bright and crowded with travelers. People laughing, kids running around, employees yelling out order numbers. Felt normal, safe. We sat down to eat, and everyone started joking and relaxing again. But I couldn't stop thinking about that diner. Later that night, when we stopped at a hotel somewhere in the Florida Panhandle, I decided to look up that town. I still remembered the road signs we'd passed before taking the exit, so I used those to track it down. It didn't have much online, just a population count under 500 and a few grainy images of a local church and a water tower. The only diner listed didn't have a name, just local restaurant, and no reviews, no phone number, just a blurry photo of the outside, exactly how I remembered it. White paint, gravel lot, pine trees in the background. I zoomed in on the photo. There were two people standing just outside the door. They were facing the camera, not smiling, just standing there, arms at their sides. One of them looked like the bald man from the diner. I tried to forget about it after that. We made it to Florida, had a fun vacation. Theme parks, beaches, the whole deal. But that stop on the way down stuck in my head like a splinter. Something about it felt off, beyond just awkward or unwelcoming. It wasn't like we walked into a place where people didn't like outsiders. It felt more like we stepped into something that wasn't meant to be seen. Like there were rules in that place, and we almost broke one just by being there. When we drove back home a week later, we took a completely different route. No one said it out loud, but I think we all felt the same thing. That town, that diner, we weren't supposed to go back. Years later, I've driven past hundreds of small towns, places that look just like that one. Quiet roads, diners with hand-painted signs, buildings half swallowed by trees. But every time I see one that looks even a little like it, I keep driving. Doesn't matter how hungry I am or how tired. Some places just don't want to be found. Some places notice you when you walk in, and you don't always want them to.